Happy Monday, everybody. Which combination of guards and bigs are going to really do the bulk of the work for this deep and talented UConn basketball team? Let's find out. You're Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. A little housekeeping on my side of the house. My YouTube support keeps getting more amazing as the days and the weeks go by. I'd love to have all of my subscribers download the audio version. If I'm being completely honest, the audio numbers have lacked where the YouTube numbers have been pretty solid all the way through, even in the off season. Wherever you get your podcast, it's equally as important to help the channel and the Locked On UConn audience grow. So please do me two quick favors. Keep those YouTube numbers up. Don't stop subscribing to the podcast. But then head over to Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Hit that follow button. This way you'll never miss a moment of Locked On UConn. Support means everything to me. If you're tuning in from your car, once you finish the show, please drop us a 5-star review or give us the review you feel is fair. I think all of it helps get people more interested in UConn content. There's a ton of great podcasts and content creators out there in the UConn space. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket. Yes, from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, today we're going to explore the potential of lineups featuring these gentlemen. I know we've kind of talked about how it's way too early to think about with, the start of the season, not even 3 months away, but closer to 4 months. But we're getting there. We're getting closer to the end of August and September. And as football season starts to ramp up with the UConn football stuff that we're doing on Fridays, and eventually when we start talking about both the UConn men and the UConn women in separate shows, the UConn men are in a unique position where their talent and their depth is at a place where it hasn't been in quite some time. So I am extrapolating all of the thought process that I've had since the start of the year when we got our recruits, when we got our transfers. I've made a couple of statements that may or may not come to fruition. But I've also gotten some really good inside knowledge into where some of these guys are, especially in the minds of the coaches. So a lineup featuring some form of Jaylin Stewart, Hassan Diarra, along with Ahmad Nowell alongside of him, and the likes of Alex Karaban, McNeeley, and one of our dominant bigs, either Samson or if Tarris Reed Jr. starts to kind of be that Adama Sanogo, hybrid that they think he is. So we're going to break down how this group can really redefine the way Dan Hurley, I shouldn't even say the word redefine, positions this new team, which is having guys who can break you down on every level of the floor, with the exception of the big. If it's Samson or if it's Tarris, every single one of those players, whether it's Alex, whether it's Liam, Jaylin, Hassan, Ahmad, are going to have an ability to beat you at every level. So I think the biggest guy that I really haven't spent enough time on, because it's almost like when a UConn has a wing that is the upcoming next guy, it's like a given, right? It's been the legacy over time. If you go back to all the way back to a guy like Cliff Robinson, I know he wasn't technically like the traditional wing, but he would be in today's game. Then you go to Donyell Marshall, same thing, more of a power forward back in his day, but clearly would have been more of a shooting guard, a small forward in today's game, or a wing. Then you go to the Ray Allens, the Richard Hamiltons, and then smaller guys as we go along. But I'm talking about these kind of 6'6" to 6'7", and then even taller up to 6'11" with Donyell Marshall, that has this disruptive force that can be a defensive stopper, has the agility to, switch on screens effectively from that defensive side, but also offensively. Jay Stu showed you exactly what kind of player he was last year when it was needed. He's a 3-level scorer. His stroke is perfect. He can shoot it from behind the arc and attack the basket from multiple angles. He can create his own shot in the mid-range. He has versatility alone that allows him to play multiple positions. You could play Jay Stewart, the shooting guard. If you wanted to go, everyone's so worried about our guards being short. If you wanted to have the point guard, whether it be Haas or Ahmad, at 6 foot to 6'2", and be like that tough, gritty guard, and then have Jay Stu at the shooting guard, Liam McNeeley at the small forward, Alex Karaban at the 4, and then Tarris Reed at the 5 or Samson at the 5. That combination, I think you're going to see a ton of that. And I think that's what this is about. So then you flow into whether it's Hassan or Ahmad. Pick your poison. Do you want the heart and soul of the lineup, which I feel like is Headband Haas, known for his relentless defense and competitive nature? Do you want his lockdown defense where he's being an absolute pest on the ball? On the offensive end, he's an improved three-point shooter, has always been a reliable slasher, getting to the rim with ease, always has been since back in high school and as Texas A&M days. He have that leadership and toughness that only New York guards truly have, and you could throw some Philly guards in there too as we get to Ahmad, and really set the tone for the rest of the team? Or do you want a high IQ point guard in Ahmad Nowell, who is going to be hard to keep off the floor with his ability to get a shot off anytime he wants? I think that reminds me so much of Kemba Walker. It's almost scary having that interview with him last week and seeing kind of that joy, that indelible smile where he's kind of knows exactly who he is, very comfortable in his own skin. Man, at 18 years old, you could just tell, and I think he's 18. It's just, there are some kids that just get it and that have that old soul, and Ahmad totally does. He has the ability to make these quick decisions, adapt to the pace of the game. He admitted that he had a little bit of a transition period, but not much. I mean, the way these kids play basketball these days with the AAU and the travel, it's not seamless, but it's close to that. There's not that huge transition, that huge jump when you're playing high level high school basketball. So I think and plus he said it, they used to call his high school games, like in terms of like the practice where they didn't call fouls, like a jungle ball, right? Because it's just like, it's a jungle and you just attack. And so to me, Dan Hurley has that same mentality where for us, like when I was playing in pickup or whatever, or if you played like 21, if you had an odd number of players, and everyone, if anyone that played basketball knows what 21 is, you don't call fouls. You just, if you get hacked, you get hacked. Like that's it. That's why a lot of people get good at finishing, because you're playing through contact, right? So that's the type of player that this kid is. And then obviously you have the Alex Karaban of the world, who is coming back as a 2-time national champion, nicknamed the Brain Center. He can score from every level. He's his range is when he gets in the gym, essentially. Some of the threes he hit last year. He can stretch the floor, obviously, with his shooting, like we said. I think the biggest weakness for him is creating off the dribble, but I think because people have to close out on him as quickly, he can go by people. He did that a ton last year when people close too hard. He can score in the post. He did that a little bit against Texas last year. He has the ability to guard multiple positions, although that's also a weakness for him is defensively. But he's also a really good shot blocker, which is so weird. Like, so it's kind of like the way I look at Cam Spencer. He wasn't the best defensive player, but he had a ton of steals because he has active hands. Same thing with Karaban. Uses his brains, his ability to kind of not fall for pump fakes. That experience and leadership can really be invaluable for this kind of younger lineup that's going to be around him. And then Liam McNeeley, 5-star, basically an Alex Karaban clone with quickness. There's no disrespect to AK, but offensively, I think McNeeley is a threat from the start, from deep. He opens up the floor, and he's going to create these lanes for Ahmad Nowell, for Jaylin Stewart, for Hassan Diarra to get to the rim. And then lastly, whether it's Samson or Tarris, the bigs are there to clean things up and to be these, offensive handoffs, to have this interior defense that is going to allow this team to kind of get out and run a little bit. I think you're going to see this team play a little faster. The sets aren't going to get any less intricate, but I think the team is going to be a little bit quicker because they have faster guards. So where you may say that they don't have the same size, I think they make up for that with quickness. For some of the folks that are worried about that, I think their ability to protect the rim is still kind of suspect here with Samson and Tarris not being the defensive threat that obviously Donovan Clingan is, but you take the good with the bad. And I think UConn is going to play a fast and aggressive play without sacrificing too much size and strength in the middle with the two guys that are going to be rotating in there. That's the combo I see that's going to get the most minutes this year. So what does that mean for the rest of the team? We're going to talk about that and who has work to be done to get some minutes. Still a lot of time left before decisions and thought processes are made. And I would like to point this out. This is my opinion. I am not spoken to Dan Hurley, Kamani Young, Luke Murray, although you guys are all free to come on the show and not tell me that to my face. I am just doing my own evaluations. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, and I'm totally okay with that. So, but let's talk about who I think has work to be done and what the consequences may end up being if they don't get a ton of play. We'll talk about that coming up after this. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. In fact, they're the sponsor of this show, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Okay, you're back on Locked On UConn. We just went over who I think are the 6-7 guys who are going to be get the majority of minutes. Do I think that Dan Hurley and his staff are only going to have a 6 or 7 man rotation? No. But do I think that the 7 of the gentlemen who I just mentioned, Samson Johnson, Tarris Reed, Liam McNeeley, Alex Karaban, Ahmad Nowell, Hassan Diarra, and Jaylin Stewart are going to get the majority of the minutes? Absolutely. And it's not, we've heard great things about Isaiah Abraham. We've heard great things about Jay Stu. We've heard some mixed reviews about Aidan Mahaney. We've heard some interesting stuff about solo ball. Some good, some and these are all just firsthand accounts of people who have absolutely no decision-making process or authority on the subject. So these are opinions, and I want everyone that's listening to this know that that's all this show is. If I ever report to you something that is a definite, you will hear me say, this is directly from XYZ, or I have a source that told me this. So, who can help themselves the most in games that I think will matter in nuance only? What I mean by that is the first part of the season is a lot of bye games, a lot of out-of-conference games that, although we want to win them all, we were 37-3 last year. I don't think we're going to repeat that similar margin. I think we're going to see some losses early, and I think part of that is going to be because we're going to be finding out who is going to be in prime position when the stakes are the highest. That's in Big East play. That's in Big East tournament play. And of course, in the NCAA tournament. So right now, the 3 folks that I can see that can really help themselves the most. Actually, before I even get to that, the 3 folks that I feel like really, I don't want to say can't help themselves, but it's hard to envision a scenario where Yusef Singari, Isaiah Abraham are going to get a ton of minutes. I think they could get spot minutes in the early parts of the season and really kind of build towards the following season and be a big part of the team in the same capacity that, Jay Ross was last year or Apostolos was last year, things like that. But I don't see them being an integral part in how UConn wins games on the court. So I'll say that to start. The guys who I do think have an opportunity but just have work to do to try to insert themselves in this conversation are, and I'll go in order. I think right from the start, you have to think Aidan Mahaney, who was a big transfer, 14-point-a-game scorer, already scored 1,000 points in a offense that is methodical, that is a little dull, if I'm using a word that isn't really derogatory, but just kind of tells it like it is. St. Mary's is a great program. They've built an incredible culture there. So I have nothing but respect for Randy Bennett and his squad, but it's not UConn. And I think what Aidan's dealing with right now is a little bit of culture shock. He had a propensity for playing down to his opponent. I reported on that early, and really all I had to do was go look at the box score and then go back and watch some of the games. The film on his games of playing against some of the competition in the WCC of teams that aren't, let's say, the caliber of Gonzaga or on that upper echelon of San Francisco, Gonzaga, the folks that are in the top tier of that league. it's pretty bad. Like I say that in all loving. Like I think Aidan's a great kid. I want to have him on the show. I think he's an unbelievable addition from a culture perspective. I think this is a kid who is a proven scorer in the college game. There's nobody on the team outside of maybe Alex Karaban that has in Hassan Diarra that's probably scored more points than him at the college level. So I think when you think about it from this, he's going through some culture shock. He's received it. And I think he could do amazing things for us during the bye game season. Is a perfect example of when Aidan can show this staff, see, you brought me in here as a kid who needed to work on not playing down to my opponents, but actually playing up. And basically, to use a term that coaches used to say to me, when you play a person that doesn't deserve to be on the same court as you, you got to step on their neck and put them out of their misery. You can't let them hang around. So that's what this kid has to show in the early part of this season. That could just be playing better defense. That could be making shots through contact. That could be taking better shots where you're open, finding the open man, whatever it means for that they're asking Aidan to do. That's what he needs to do and show them that early so that they can feel comfortable about him playing a bigger role as season goes on. Same thing for Solo Ball. Solo has all the tools. Tough kid, great athlete, proved himself in the world's most famous arena against Carolina last year. He's also the type of kid that can have a monster day offensively. He's also not giving up anything on defense. So in a weird world where we aren't, offensively up to snuff and we didn't have as many options as UConn has this year, I'd have zero issue with either Aidan or Solo being the starting point guard of this team. None whatsoever. Sign me up for it. If, God forbid, anybody has an injury, next man up, either of these guys fits that bill. The only thing that is, I think, holding some of these guys back is this is not about tenure. This is not about you've been in the system. And I think that's the biggest thing. And I'm going to mention another guy, and that's going to be the biggest thing for all of them. Jayden Ross, right? These are all nice problems to have for Danny Hurley, that he's got to kind of split hairs about who is playing the best and who isn't. I think we're all waiting on an explosion for Jayden Ross because he gets talked about a lot. He had that great block on Samson Johnson. He had a great open practice. Everyone was super impressed by him. So is he going to get the starting nod? Not necessarily the starting nod, but the first guy off the bench nod. I don't see him right now as that guy because you have Jaylin and Liam. I feel like are ahead of him. So if he doesn't get what he is getting out of the ROI that Dan Hurley talks about, that they both want the ROI to be there, he's the likeliest transfer. And it could go to Solo too, because we've talked about, every one of these kids, they can play. They all can play, and they all can play at a high level. But when you compete, it's not about, this is what I was saying, it's not about the tenure or, who's been longer on the team or who's, it's about who's winning and creating winning opportunities for Dan Hurley and his staff and who they want to double down on. And they are doubling down on these kids. But now they're starting to get into the competition phase, and it's maybe not shaking out the way that I think some of them thought. And I think that's something that will come to fruition. And I honestly hope I'm wrong about all of this stuff, because I don't want to see Solo play anywhere else. I don't want to see Jayden Ross play anywhere else. I want to see Aidan succeed here. But this is just my thought process, right? So if you come to a school and you didn't start right away, it's not as big a deal. And these guys stuck around. But at least back in the day, one of the things that I don't really like about kind of the way things are structured now, but like much of life, it's not fair. If you waited around for the first 2 years and you got your chance junior year, you got you're gonna get that opportunity to be featured, quote unquote, right? So, but the pressure to transfer to a school where you can shine, so that you still have a couple of years or at least a year to kind of show that you're NBA material, is almost going to be too great. And now that you don't have to sit a year, it's a real option to do it more than once. Our beloved Cam Spencer did it twice, ended up with a chip his last season. So I hope they all get that run. I hope that Dan Hurley has a master plan to get everyone around 15 to 20 minutes a game. But I think the beginning of the season, we may see some surprising guys sit whom thought they were going to be major contributors. So it'll be an interesting beginning of the year. I think that's what we should be looking out for, is who's getting the run of minutes in kind of some important segments to kind of, are the coaches feeling them out? Like, I don't think they care whether they beat New Hampshire by 20 or 40. It's going to be about who's playing the best and kind of deciphering that. So just so you know, Locked On College Football. College football is back, and Locked On College Football podcast kicks off all the action with a live season preview at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, tomorrow, August 20th, on the Locked On College 24/7 streaming YouTube channel. This 4-part series covers each of the 4 major conferences with discussions on ACC, Big 10, Big 12, and SEC teams that have a shot at the expanded college football playoffs. Maybe UConn does. I don't know. We'll see. Independent. Win some games. Host involvement here. Be sure to check out this special streaming on Locked On College 24/7 YouTube channel or their Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to talk about the Maui Invitational. I know some of my Connecticut folks up there. I hope everyone's safe from all of the rain you got. It's starting to pour down on me here in Greensboro, North Carolina, so I just remembered that. Saw some crazy shots of folks. I hope everyone dealt with that. We had about a 10 or 12-inch rainstorm our way just last week. So we're going to talk about the Maui Invitational, another beautiful site where UConn is playing, and the bracket's out. So let's talk about that coming up after this. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S.-based customers. Okay, you're back on Locked On UConn. Last segment of the day on this Monday, August 19th. Remember, we're running a promo. If you want 2 tickets to the Merrimack versus UConn home opener September 7th at the Rent, I just received them in my inbox from a friend of the program, Big Larry. He has gifted his season tickets to a lucky winner. I think we have 27 people signed up for the raffle. Not exactly a terrible odds so if you're still interested, you have a week to sign up. Please subscribe to the podcast. Try to download the audio version of it as well if you haven't done that already. But I want to give this away to a true UConn fan. And so right now I have a bunch ready to rock. And if you already entered, you had a really good shot at winning. We'll do the drawing and I'll be in touch. But back to not something that is more important, but the UConn basketball Maui Invitational came out today. This is the lineups. We have UConn versus Memphis, an old AAC foe. I believe, is it Memphis still in the AAC? I think they are. Sorry, I was trying a new soundboard. What do you guys think about that? Yeah, UConn Memphis. That's a great first round game. If they win that game, you got Michigan State versus Colorado. Then on the other side of the bracket, Auburn, Iowa State, then North Carolina, Dayton. So, it's an 18 tournament, 3 games potentially if you win it all. So I believe you play the, 3rd and 5th place. So you get 3 games no matter what. So listen, I love this bracket because all of the teams, 3 of the teams that are Final Four contenders are on one side of the bracket: Auburn, Iowa State, North Carolina. Dayton was a second round team last year. They lost a ton of players. Michigan State was a Sweet 16. No, sophomore, second round. They lost to North Carolina last year in the second round. That's right. And then UConn obviously won it all. Memphis didn't make the tournament. So I saw something funny from Mr. Hotballs on Twitter. It said UConn versus Memphis, Dan Hurley versus Penny Hardaway is like a coaching equivalent of Godzilla versus Bambi. And I couldn't agree more. And I'm going to say, honestly, that's what Memphis is going to end up doing if we play to our full capabilities. But listen, like we talked about, it's early in the season. I think a lot of these guys are going to be really trying to figure out where they're going to be. Let's look up. I had Memphis's team up here. I think they're always talented. I think that's the biggest thing that's difficult with me with Penny Hardaway. I love Penny Hardaway as a basketball player, but as a coach, he always has these super talented teams that just never can get out of their own way. And at some point, you kind of have to ask yourself a question: Am I actually any good at this job? They did get Tyrese Hunter as a Texas transfer. He's a good player, super great athlete. Tyreek Smith is good. He's a fifth-year senior from Louisiana. PJ Haggerty, I believe, was at Kentucky. They have a big center in Musa Cisse. I think he's a fifth-year guy. So it's not like they're devoid of talent and this is like a walkover game. They're gonna give us a little run for their money, But it's Memphis. It's I guess the one thing that I would give Memphis a lot of credit for is early in the year they usually play pretty well. It's not until they start to actually play teams that are connected that they end up having their issues. So I think that's a UConn win in my opinion right now. I mean, obviously a lot of things can change between now and the Maui games or in November. Then you got Michigan State, Colorado. You'd like to say Michigan State is a winner over that, but Colorado's tough. They scored a ton of points, but Michigan State's usually pretty good in a tournament situation, even though Tommy Izzo hasn't really won anything since I was in high school. Auburn, Iowa State, that's a kind of a rock fight. I think Iowa State ends up winning that game. North Carolina, it sets up for a UConn North Carolina final. I mean, that's the way they put it. And I think that's something that I believe is the way that they schedule these tournaments, is they give you the best case scenario for the finals, and then just kind of obviously let the chips fall where they may. So winning this tournament doesn't predicate success over time. It could end up being a nice time for the kids. Great to be in Maui. Someone asked me this question. Let's look this up. Is the Maui Invitational on the Big Island? Invitational still happening in its original location. Let's find out. So the 2024 edition of the Maui Invitational to return to Lahaina Civic Center in November. The 2024 edition of the Maui Invitational we played in its traditional home in Lahaina Civic Center. So if you ask that question on X about whether they were returning to the original site because of the wildfires, the terrible things that happened in 2023, that is 100% they're going back there. So it's good for the area. Obviously it brings some economic prowess. That area's been. I'm not going to get into what I think about what happened to those poor people. It's terrible. Wildfires. We had floods in Connecticut. A lot of crazy stuff happened, and if you start thinking about that over time, you go crazy, right? I'm looking forward to this because whenever I feel like UConn plays a schedule like this, where they can really challenge themselves early against NCAA tournament teams, I love it. Plus, they're playing at Texas. Plus, they're having Baylor at home. Plus, they're having Gonzaga at the Madison Square Garden. So I'm happy that they're playing a challenging schedule. I'm looking forward to the guys who I mentioned who I feel like have work to do. Aidan Mahaney, Solo, Jayden Ross, maybe to some extent, Youssef. Show that you have the ability to play over the guys who I feel like are ahead of you in the lineup, and use stupid guys like me who don't believe in you to fuel your fire, because we trust. I say that tongue in cheek. 100% I believe in all of you, and I want you guys to succeed. So I want this to be a team of 10 to 11 guys that Dan Hurley has to play, because there's just no way to keep these guys off the court. So looking forward to it. Thank you for making Locked On UConn your first listen of the day. For the second listen, Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for exciting season on the gridiron with discussions of the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics. He will discuss conference realignment, transfer portal, NIL, new college football, expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. Don't forget to get into the the pool for tickets for the football game, not this Friday for September 7th, the home opener at the Rent. Also, if you enter in this raffle for these tickets, you will be entered in any ticket giveaways, including basketball for men's and women's, that I have you in. So let's pump those numbers up, guys. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in, stay connected, make sure that toughness meter is always rising. And as always, go Huskies.